everybody. So that particular warm-up drill that we were doing there, again, our focus was on our concepts of knee-elbow connection and understanding hip angles. So we're working on guard retention this week, and guard retention can often be a pretty nebulous sort of concept, and especially at the white belt level, it's a concept that you're rarely going to actually put effort into working on. You might do like a warm-up drill of just like, you know, high legs or something like that, but very rarely will we actually talk about the overarching concepts behind guard retention. And in my opinion, guard retention is one of the most important concepts that you can learn as a beginner in jiu-jitsu. And the reason that I think that is because 70% of your time spent in jiu-jitsu is going to be in some type of guard position, whether it's passing or whether it's playing the guard, you're going to find yourself in the guard in some way. So, first things first, I want to talk about some of our main concepts behind guard retention. And in case you're confused, guard retention just means not letting people pass your guard. So we're going to go over a couple of concepts, and then we're going to talk about a couple of movements that we can use. So first thing I want to differentiate is the difference between guard retention and guard recovery. So in case you're unfamiliar, guard retention is where I'm playing guard, and my opponent is starting to pass, and as they're passing, I use a movement to help retain my guard and stay in a guard position. Guard recovery is essentially like the deep end of the pool. He's basically past my guard, right? Maybe he's leg dragging, he's already gotten to a pretty heavy position. Guard retention, or recovery rather, is where I make a movement to go from the deep end of the pool back to my guard position, okay? So it helps to understand that there are phases of the guard that we move through when we're doing jiu-jitsu. The engagement phase, that's what we were working on last week, is where neither one of us have really made contact with the other person, okay? We're both kind of feeling each other out. We're hand fighting. He's looking for lever control to my hips to put me on my back, and I'm looking to start setting up my guard. The maintenance phase is where I have a guard set up, and essentially you can think of this like the offensive phase, right? I'm trying to hit sweeps, I'm trying to do stuff. The retention phase is where he is in a passing position. So perhaps he's in a knee cut position. Now I'm in the retention phase of the guard. So I need to be thinking, okay, how can I be getting back to my guard? And of course, you could call the recovery its own phase, but for all intents and purposes, just split it into 3 phases: engagement, maintenance, and retention. So more so than anything else, guys, I want you to at least have a good understanding of where you are in the guard, okay? Are you in the engagement phase? Are you in the maintenance phase? Are you in the retention phase? As beginners, if we can understand this, it's really going to help us not only with our guard retention, but with passing and also with guard playing as well. So we talked about the knee-elbow connection. This is a super important detail, guys. When my opponent is passing my guard, their whole objective, like we talked about last week, is to use my legs as levers to turn my hips and to control my hips so that I can't re-guard. In order to do that, he needs to get his body in between my elbow and my knee. If my elbows and knees are far apart, it's very easy for him to start moving his body into that space. So by closing the knees and elbows together, I'm essentially closing that door or that gate and not allowing him access. Now, if I just point my knee and my elbow together like this, there is a gap here, and he can also just start driving my legs apart. Okay? It's very easy. If Coach Seth grabs my wrist and my ankle, go ahead and pull my legs apart. Yeah, it's very easy for him to do that. When I come in here, same thing, Coach. It's a little bit more difficult now because I have a tighter shell that I'm creating. So this is a good option that you guys can practice before class, just kind of using the abductor muscles to work on keeping your knees tight against your chest here. Okay? That's going to do you very well with your guard retention. Now, we're going to be looking at our high leg tonight. And the high leg is a great guard retention movement to start with, mainly because we looked at our leg drag last week. So when we drill at the end of class, like everyone's getting leg dragged. So it's a good thing that we're going to go over this. If you weren't with us last week, real quick, Coach is on his back. So I won the engagement phase. I put him on his back. I have double lever control. I start to redirect his hips. As I redirect his hips, I use my placeholder of the shin, and I start coming down, getting into my leg drag position, all that sort of fun stuff. So if you weren't with us last week, no worries. I'll make sure you were with somebody who was. And the top person is going to be getting to that leg drag position. From there, we're going to high leg. I'm going to demonstrate what it looks like, and then we'll break it down. Here we go. Alrighty, guys. So this is a very easy movement. I'm going to show you how to do this without needing to be flexible, right? In my opinion, that's a very important thing to have in your arsenal is how to do something without the need of flexibility, speed, or strength. So when my opponent leg drags me, first thing I need to understand, what phase of the guard am I in? I am no longer playing guard. I am now in the retention phase. I need to retain my guard. So my headlights, the lines coming out of my knees, are no longer pointing at my opponent, meaning that he is passing my guard. So all I'm going to try to do is get my headlights pointing back at him. To do that, I'm going to always start by blocking the leading edge. I'm going to block the thing that's going to pin me down, okay? So my hands are going to be coming here to the shoulders, the biceps, the knees. I'm going to be blocking the body parts that are going to be pinning me down. However, once I do that, I need to start doing a calf curl with my left leg to elevate my hips. This is going to do two things. Number one, it's going to allow me to start lifting my hips up, giving me more mobility. But number two, it's going to enable me to create another frame with my shin. As I lift my hips up, I'm dipping my shin down, creating a primary frame here. As he goes to drive into me, this is going to buy me a little bit of time. Now, the high leg is where I take my opposite foot and I'm stepping it over onto his center of mass, okay? It depends on where your opponent is, but normally we aim to put our feet right around their chest or hip area. So again, he's down tight. I have my primary frame. My hips come up, and I step. Now I'm using a placeholder system. Because I've created a secondary frame here, I can remove the first frame. As I do that, I'm going to create regulated tension on his body to start creating space to center back up, getting my headlights pointing back at him. So if we go again slow motion, as he drags, headlights are pointing away. I calf curl to lift the hips up. I high leg and create my frames. And now, notice my headlights are pointing this way, so I can't stop here. If I stop here, he's going to start leg smashing me, so I'm going to continue rotating, getting my feet back on him, and returning to my guard position. So if we rotate to the side, guys, you can actually notice that for the entirety of this movement, my hips are off the floor. So as he drags, my hips are up. My hips are up, my hips are up, my hips are up. And even at the end, once I'm back to this position, my hips are still up. Once I'm here, I can start to sink back down, okay? And then start to use my grips to start setting up the tacks. All right, guys, so I'll show one more time without talking, nice and slow. So a quick note, you can always use your hands as backup frames, okay? Our primary concept for guard retention is blocking the leading edge and then realigning our hip angle. So I'm always looking to block the thing that's going to pin me down. So my hands should always be busy. If I'm trying to defend my guard and my hands are just splayed out to the side, then these are essentially useless. Okay, so with this particular guard pass, I want to keep my hands somewhere on them as I'm doing the high leg. Okay, so this is our basic variation. We're going to drill this real quick, guys. Since this is pretty quick, I want you guys to try it a few times before you switch top and bottom. So let's say 5 times perhaps, and then you can switch. For the top person, if you're not comfortable leg dragging on both sides, leg drag on one side a few times, but I want you to try to leg drag on the other side as well. Does anybody need to see it again? Okay, yeah, no worries. All right, so again here, guys. My opponent's won the engagement phase. He has double ankles. He starts to drag. My headlights are turned away. I calf curl. This is going to enable me to start lifting my hips. My frames are at the ready at all times. I start stepping, using a frame to push him away and get back to my guard. A good note to remember is in jiu-jitsu, we will rarely ever kick our opponent. So once I'm here, I will rarely ever do this and try to kick him off of me. That looks like it would be effective, but the problem is that if I'm going against someone good, which is what we're always preparing for, kicking is just forcing my legs in one direction. So if he feels that and redirects, I'm just setting myself up for disaster. But secondarily, it's also disconnecting us, so I'm losing control. If I kick him away, not only did I just give him a pass, but I've also kind of reset everything, right? If I'm trying to play guard, I want him to be close to me. If I do this, get out of here. Now he's far away, and I've essentially just reset everything. So try to break the habit of just kicking your partner, okay? That's not a good habit. So let's give it a go here, guys. On to 1, 2. All right, I want to touch on a couple things. This is looking good. I want to touch on a couple things before we move on. So first things first, if you have any interest in competing, we have to understand how to use our flexibility to high leg, okay? Because there's kind of like a point of no return. Once they beat the knee frame, which is what we're aiming to do with the leg drag, we're progressively beating frames up to the hips. Once they beat that knee frame, we're gonna need to rely on flexibility. So when we do this last round here, guys, for the high leg, I want the leg dragger, when they drag, to start getting his chest down and beating this knee frame here, okay? Now I'm gonna need to rely on my flexibility a little bit, okay? So my frames are definitely gonna need to come in now. So I'm gonna be starting to use my frames, creating some semblance of space just to make it a little bit easier for me to high leg. But again, everything's the same. I'm gonna be calf curling, high legging, and now starting to get this leg in, right? Some people may be able to just, if you're flexible, you could just get this leg whipped over, right? I'm relatively flexible this way, but having the frames here is just gonna create a nice support structure to maintain this space between the two of us as I start to high leg, okay? So a couple quick things here, guys. Top person, when we're leg dragging, we're making sure that we're getting close to them, okay? Some of us are leg dragging and then we're standing up like this. Yes, right here. Okay, if he's controlling the ankles, go ahead and grab the ankles there, coach. Okay, if he's controlling the ankles, this is a fine setup for a leg drag, but it's not gonna be a leg drag that we would use successfully to pass a good guard, right? He's just too high, he's too far away from me, all right? Notice his legs are essentially straight. When he leg drags, his objective is to be turning my hips and trying to smash my knees together, right? Beating these leg frames and getting down nice and low. So when we leg drag, even if we're just going for a basic one, he still needs to keep his knees nice and bent. So not only is this a good habit for him to get into, this creates my platform from which I can generate my lift of the hip here with the calf curl, okay? So if his legs are straight, I don't need to do a high leg, right? If his legs are straight like this, I don't need to high leg. I can just pull my feet right back up, all right? So again, he's gonna be down nice and close. So now, if he's beating this knee like he's done here, I'm gonna need to start framing and then starting to use a little bit more flexibility to high leg. We don't want to linger in this position. Some of us are staying here a little bit, okay? Remember, as soon as I create this frame, I'm going to start extending, lifting my hips and resetting the guard, okay? The more I linger in a position where my headlights are not entirely facing him, because if you guys realize, when I high leg, my headlights are actually facing that way, okay? This is the intermediary position between guard retention and maintenance. So once I'm here, I'm framing to get back to the guard. So I want to make sure that I'm not lingering with that foot crossed over my hip for too long. As soon as I step, I'm turning those hips quickly, okay? Last little thing, guys. When we high, let's go rotate a little bit here, coach. So he drags. When we do this high leg, the more I can pull my knee to my chest, kind of like with the knee elbow connection, the more I can pull my knee to the chest, the easier it's gonna be to step on him. Again, our goal is to step on his chest, but sometimes that won't be an option, especially if I'm in deeper waters or if I'm going against a good guard passer, I might not be able to step on the chest. I might have to step somewhere on the shoulder or on the arms or the biceps. So I'm just always looking to get my foot connected to somewhere on his upper body, okay? Some of us are trying to be very particular with where we put the foot, anywhere except for the face. Right, that's a way to think about it. If I put my foot anywhere, just don't put it on their face. Okay, it's just not a cool thing to do, right? But again, he's coming down here. When he's gonna leg drag, guys, remember, he's gonna be using those shoulders to pin me down. So I'm framing the shoulders. This is the leading edge, the thing that's gonna pin me. So in this case, if I'm already deep in here, I'm just gonna step on whatever I can get. Maybe it's the shoulder. Maybe it's the opposite shoulder. Maybe it's the chest or the hip. But again, I'm coming back and getting right back to my guard. Okay, for those of you who are a little bit more experienced, feel free to set up a guard position once you high leg, right? So if he drags here, I come out, right, I high leg, whatever, just set up some type of guard. Always have the reaction, especially if you want to compete, of defending the guard and then attacking from the guard, okay? So let's do one more round of the high leg, then we're going to talk about the Granby tonight. Any questions? No, sir. 1, 2. All right, guys, so our concept for guard retention can be boiled down to blocking the leading edge of our opponent's body, the thing that is going to pin us down, and then realigning our hip angle, getting our hips to return and face them. Just a safety note, we mentioned this like every class, but almost never will the leading edge of somebody's body be their hips, all right? And this is a very dangerous habit to get into. If he's passing my guard and I'm reaching up to try to block his hips, if his hips suddenly come crashing down on top of my wrist, it's an easy way to break my wrist. Additionally, blocking the hips is just going to turn my hand into a very easy lever to manipulate. Okay, so not only will he not generally use his hips to pass my guard, it's generally going to be the shoulders, knees, head, chest. I'm also in danger of hurting my own wrist. So this is just a thing that I always want to remind you guys about because I have seen and been on the receiving end of many annoying wrist injuries because of reaching out and trying to stop that hip. And then they suddenly just like hip switch and smash down on top of the wrist. And it's just unnecessary. So not only is it inefficient, it's also dangerous. Let's now go over one more guard retention movement. This is one that people can consider to be advanced. By no means do I consider this advanced at all. In fact, I consider this a very fundamental guard retention movement. And it's one that I'm, again, going to go with the context of not being flexible. You're not going to need to be flexible to do this. However, flexibility always helps, okay? We're going to be talking about a full Granby. We've talked about half Granbys before. When we're in the seated guard and our opponent's breaking the frame, we come up on the tripod of the shoulder and the knee, and then we throw that leg over. That's our half Granby. We've looked at the full Granby before, but we're going to look at it in the context of the leg drag and the high leg. So he's already dragged my legs. So let's say that not only has he beaten this knee, I can't extract this leg after I high leg. Okay, so what that would look like is I high leg here, but I just simply can't extract this leg. So what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to do a Granby roll, which is an inversion. So an inversion is where I come up onto my shoulders and I'm upside down. Now don't worry, you're not going to be upside down forever, okay? I'm going to talk about how to do this and not injure your neck, because every time people see people inverting, their immediate reaction is, oh, they're going to break their neck doing that. But the reality of it is, when I invert, I should never actually be on my neck. If I'm on my neck, I'm not inverting correctly, okay? So a Granby roll is here, where I rotate and get back to my guard. All right, it looks fancy, and this is the stuff that people always ask. They're like, well, man, you always like roll around every time I'm passing the guard. This is the stuff that we're using. We're using the Granby, all right? So let's talk about how this works. So again, I'm just trying to realign my hip angle. So my hips are pointing that way. I high leg, my hips are pointing that way, and I can't extract this leg. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to look to get my head in between his feet, okay? Now, don't overcomplicate it. I don't have to do like a sudden spinny movement. I'm gonna use him to help me get there, okay? I'm gonna reach and start grabbing on his ankles and literally pulling myself towards his feet. I can then start walking across his legs like I'm climbing around bars. This is gonna enable me to realign my hip angle. Now, while I don't recommend you do this in practice, if I were to stop halfway, so a high leg, if I stop halfway, this is what we call an inverted position, meaning I'm upside down. However, if you notice, I'm not actually on my neck. My neck has full range of motion. I'm on my shoulder blades. If Coach Seth were to walk away, I'm essentially just in like a shoulder stand position, like I'm trying to roll backwards. I'm doing this, okay? If I am up on my neck like this is a dangerous position to be in because now my neck is at a scary angle, okay? So again, this just requires us to have decent, at best, decent flexibility by pulling our knees to our chest. So if you can do a pretty decent knee-elbow connection, you should have no problem at all inverting. So again, if we come back to this position here, my feet are on him at all times, okay? Again, my hands can be pulling and climbing. If you're good, you don't even need to use your hands. You can just spin freely. However, I encourage everyone to start off by using the hands. So let's go through this step by step. Step number one is high leg. I'm in a high leg like we just did, okay? So I step over. Now, step number two, I'm gonna invert, meaning I'm gonna get my head in between his feet as I pull my body towards him using his legs. So I'm gonna cup his leg, pull myself towards him, and I'm just gonna continue walking, pushing and turning my body until I can get my feet back to his hips, but most importantly, realigning my hip angle. If I, at any point, allow my feet to disconnect and I remove my frames from his body, then let me show you what that would look like. The danger is, if I'm here, he leg drags, I'm here, but then my feet come disconnected, well now, I have nothing maintaining his body. So I'm always looking to maintain frames when I'm playing guard. So when I'm here, I'm just gonna always keep my feet on him in some capacity. Okay? Let's go one more time nice and slow without talking here. Again, my neck totally unimpeded. My head was off the floor. I was rotating on my shoulder blades. So here's how we're gonna help you guys out if you have a little bit of trouble with this one. The top person is actually gonna help you spin and rotate. So they're essentially gonna help guide your legs and almost rotate your body. So let me show you what that's gonna look like. Once coach drags my legs here, if I'm having a little bit of trouble or if I get stuck, he's gonna help guide me in the right direction. So I high leg first, that moves my hips. Now as I start rotating, Coach Seth is just gonna start helping me turn my legs around until I can get my feet back on him. Okay, guys? Start slow, but in reality, it's easier to do this fast, so feel it out. Yes, sir?
Guys, if you know me at all, you know my neck gets hurt really easily, and I rely on this quite a lot. People always complain that Ray and I do this all the time, and it's not because we're super fast. It's not because we're super flexible. Actually, I'm not those things. We just have to be good at this. As our size, against people that are bigger than us, we have to be good at it. Now, you might not run into the same problems that we do, but it's good to fundamentally understand what we're talking about here to be able to do it. Another thing that helps some people when they're practicing this is actually starting at that halfway point, right here. So I'm kind of picking my butt up off the ground. A lot of people try to spin on their back. It's not on your back, it's on your shoulders. So you can start with your head kind of right next to your legs, put your feet up, and now all I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna use my hands to turn back around. So this cuts the whole movement in half, and that can help you understand if you're really having trouble. Try the whole thing first, but if you really have a lot of trouble understanding where you're going, try starting at that halfway point.
Any questions? Yes, Larry?
What if he doesn't let go of your leg when you're doing the full granny?
Okay, so if we're in this position where your leg drags,
Right here?
this leg,
Right, so you throw your leg over.
yeah. So once I invert, because I'm changing the angle of his grip, I'm pointing my knee down. Larry, the reason he's able to control this is because he's capping the knee off, meaning he's putting a bar behind my knee. If I start to rotate that knee, now my knee's pointing down.
I can try to hold as tight as
So
I can.
yeah, even if he's holding, I can continue rotating. It's not really gonna be an efficient way to control that leg. All right. Yes, sir, any other questions? Yes, Blake?
Comment on that.
Please.
Anytime your knee is not like that, if you can get your knee inverted, it will always get out.
Yeah, because again, we're changing the orientation of the grip, and we're also creating that knee and turning it into a frame, okay, which is always gonna help free that knee a little bit easier because we can almost slide it out. My man. Ready, 1, 2. Any questions, guys? So let's conclude with what we covered tonight. So we were working on guard retention. We're talking about how to block the leading edge and realign our hip angle. We went over our high leg against the leg drag. We had the understanding of I am no longer in the maintenance phase because my hips are no longer pointing at him. I need to realign my hips with the high leg. And then that Granby roll, again, guys, that's not like a make or break it type of movement. If you don't want to Granby roll, don't Granby roll, okay? It's totally fine. If you don't want to invert, no problem at all. Your guard retention will increase significantly if you do develop that ability. And as white belts, if you develop that ability now, you won't have to suddenly get, when you're a purple belt and white belts are passing your guard and you're like, man, I suck at guard retention, you won't have to then learn how to Granby roll. So you'll be able to have really good guard retention starting on fairly early. Does anybody have any questions about what we covered this evening? All right, guys, let's get water and mouth guards or any protective gear you may need. We'll come back and start drilling. 1, 2.